So next question was, how did you determine who your customer base was when you first started 15.5? That's a good question. When I was originally thinking that 15.5, well, let me take a step back. So, who I had in mind when I started building 15.5 were the EO customers, the EO members that I knew. So I was in this organization called EO, and there's 8,500 members worldwide. They all have businesses that do at least $1 million in sales. And they were the types of companies that I was doing strategy day work for. So working with their CEOs and their executive team. So I really understood their challenges, their communication challenges, their focus challenges, their dealing with very limited resources and wanting to produce big outcomes. And so I had them in mind when I was building 15.5, and they were the types of companies that I already had relationships with and who I went out to try the product initially. So, I had, I don't know, 6 or 8 friends who all had different companies, and I, asked them to bear with me and, thankfully still have those relationships because it was pretty bad in the beginning. But had them use the product and give me feedback, and I was really tailoring it to them. And so I think it's really important when you're starting a product to have a certain persona in mind. And it's easy to get to a persona if you actually know people like that. It's like go hang out with, 5 or 6 people who kind of match this very limited persona. It doesn't mean that your product's just going to resonate with them. But when you're starting out, you got to think about like the entire customer base. Like you may have a product like 15.5, I think is actually relevant to a large percentage of the marketplace. But there's a book called Crossing the Chasm. If you haven't read it, just Google the law of diffusion of innovations. You don't have to read the whole book. But
so I was talking about the law of diffusion of innovations and the early adopters and early majority, or innovators and early adopters. So any given sense of the population, you've got this bell curve, and you've got kind of the innovators and early adopters way on the edge of the bell curve, and you may be building the product for that mass majority people, but when you're first starting out, those aren't the people who are going to care enough to try your product. Like they're the people who are going to be like, oh yeah, I've heard about that thing. I should try it. But the people who tried Twitter early on, I was not an early adopter of Twitter. I was like number 14 million on Twitter. It took 14 million people to use it before I was like, all right, I get it. I should probably try this thing. So clearly not an innovator or early adopter when it came to Twitter. But the people who were like the first 100 or the first 1,000, those are the guys that you want to tailor this to. And those are the ones who care so much about the product. And frankly, probably want some features and things that your mass majority won't care about down the line, and that's okay. You can start out making something that's just so awesome for these people who care so much, and there's just a few of them, that you learn about that, and they're the ones who are going to go out and tell everybody else how awesome your product is. So, over time, you can make the product more open and accessible to the majority. And Jeffrey Moore in his book talks about the challenge of going, once you get to that, you've kind of captured 15% of the market, the innovators and the innovators and early adopters. You have to do what's called crossing the chasm. There's this kind of dangerous place where you've got to get from that segment of the market to the majority. And a lot of companies die at that point because they're not able to make the leap. They're not able to make the leap to the majority. And so there is a period where you're going to have to deal with that. But it's shown time and time again that the way to really focus on it is to focus on that really limited segment, even though you may have the majority in mind.